Assalamualaikum. I am Nurul Maisarah and I am a member of Ecovenger. The country that we chose is Singapore. Here's the little background of Singapore. So, the written history of Singapore may date back of the 3rd century. Evidence suggests that a significant trading settlement existed in Singapore during the 14th century. In the late 14th century, Singapore was under the rule of para Maisarah, who killed the previous rulers, and he was expelled by the Majapahit or the Siamese. It then came under the Malacca Sultan and then the Johor Sultan. In 1890, Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles negotiated a treaty whereby Johor allowed the British to allocate a trading port on the island, leading to the establishment of the British colony of Singapore in 1890. During World War II, Singapore was conquered and occupied by the Japanese Empire from 1942 to 1945. By the war end, Singapore reversed to British control, with increasing level of self-government being granted, culminating in Singapore merger with the Federation of Malaya to form Malaysia in 1963. However, social unrest and disputes between Singapore ruling People Action Party and Malaysian Alliance Party result in Singapore expulsion from Malaysia. Singapore became an independent republic on 9 August 1965. Facing severe unemployment and a housing crisis, Singapore embarked on the modernization program beginning in the late 1960s centuries through the 1970s centuries that focused on establishing a manufacturing industry, developing large public housing assets, and investing heavily on public education. By the 1990s centuries, the country had become one of the world's most prosperous nations, with a highly developed free market economy, strong international trading link, and the highest per capita gross domestic product in Asia outside Japan. Now, let me move to economic condition in Singapore.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Natasha, Binti Mohamad Jamlos will explain to you about the economic condition in Singapore. Singapore has confronted with several economic problems such as unemployment, poor infrastructure and housing storage about 50 years ago. As far as the economy of Singapore is concerned, the tiny state has made the best of some unfavorable conditions. However, there are 4 economic conditions in Singapore which are: point number 1, lack of land and resource. Singapore has a small surface area around 700 kilometers. It lacks both land and natural resources like fuel, metals and minerals. It's hardly surprising that only 1.3% of the labor force is employed in agriculture, and the primary sector doesn't make a significant contribution to the gross domestic product. Point number 2, has a strategic trading location. Singapore has one distinct economic advantage. It is location. The location is 119 kilometers of coastline features natural deep water ports, and the island is situated along important shipping routes in Southeast Asia. Trades and commerce are key parts of the economy. The government has also invested in education for decades. Human capital and a skilled workforce contribute to the prosperous economy in Singapore. Point number 3, export goods as the main source of Singapore economy. Exports such as electronic, chemical and services are the main source of Singapore economy. Besides, deep water is very crucial in Singapore because it allows them to purchase natural resources and raw goods which Singapore are lack of. For instance, they import aircraft, crude oil and petroleum product, electronic component, radio and television receiver or parts vehicle or parts, motor vehicles, chemicals, food and beverage, iron or steel and textile, yarns and fabrics. Additionally, their main import and export partner are countries like China, Malaysia, United States and a few more. So, last but not least, point number 4 is the agriculture sector is not profitable for Singapore. The agriculture primary sector barely play a role in Singapore economy. There is agribusiness part where some foodstuff are produced and other agricultural product includes orchids for horticultural or ornamental fish. But Singapore manufactures is much more significant. About 20% of Singapore gross product comes from industry and the secondary sector employs 15% of the workforce. So now let's move to the economic data.
Hi, my name is Mohamad Safwan with Zunairinizam. Now I want to explain to you data of the gross domestic product in Singapore. This is the chart bar of the gross domestic product in Singapore. This is the chart bar of the gross domestic product. The gross domestic product total in Singapore was 437.34 billion US dollar in 2016. In 2017, 323.91 billion US dollar the gross domestic product in Singapore. The gross domestic product in 2018 was 367.52 billion US dollar. The GDP value of Singapore represents 0.52% of the world economies. In Singapore, the most important categories in the consumer price index are housing, 25% of the total weight, and food, 22%. The index also includes transport, 60%, education, 7%, health, 6%, communication, 5%, and clothing and footwear, 3%. The first is to use the Consumer Price Index (CPI), which tracks the movement of price in a basket of goods, for example, housing, transport, food, and so forth. The other way is to use core inflation, which excludes the cost of private housing and transport. This method reasons that Singapore do not need private housing and transport. Without going into too much technical details, inflation in Singapore has slowed. It is at the lowest point in 30 years. This is meanwhile our costing of living is still rising. The speed at which is rising as slow.
Hi, my name is Nurul Binti Pauzi. Today I will explain to you guys review inflation data of Singapore. First and foremost, for 2016, inflation rate for Singapore is negative 0.53%. For 2017, the rate of inflation is 0.5%. 2008. And lastly, for 2018, the rate is 1.04. Let me explain more detail about inflation in every years. For 2016, Singapore inflation rose to 0.2% on year in December 2016 from 0.0% in November due to a stronger pickup in the cost of a private road transport. In during this, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, and the Ministry of Trade and Industry, MTI, said on Monday that private road transport costs increased by 1.7% in December. Following the 0.2% rise in November as a result of higher petrol price and car park fees. Service inflation edged up to 1.6% in December from 1.5% in November, mainly on account of faster pace of increase in holiday expenses, which more than offset the larger contraction in telecommunication service fees. Food inflation was 2.0% in December, remained unchanged. Accommodation costs fell by 3.8% in December, similar to the previous month. Overall, retail good inflation is to 0.0% in December from 0.2% in November. Largely, on account of all fall in the price of personal care products following the rise in November. For the whole of 2016, Consumer Price Index, CPI, all item inflation came in negative 0.5% for the second consecutive year. Move to another year. For 2017, private road transport inflation slowed to 2.6% in December from 4.1% the month before. This was mainly due to the dissipation of base effects associated with the increase in parking fees in December 2016, as well as a smaller year ago increase in petrol prices. Service inflation fell to 1.3% in December from 1.6% in November, largely reflecting a decline in airfares and holiday expenses. Food inflation hit to 1.4% in December from 1.5% in preceding months, as a smaller increase in the prices of non-cooked food items. The cost of accommodation fell by 3.8% in December, moderating from the 3.9% decline in the previous month as the fall in housing retail eased. Lastly, for 2018, Singapore's core inflation edged up to 1.9% year-on-year in October from 1.8% the previous month. According to the latest figure released on Friday, November 23, a larger increase in the cost of electricity and gas more than offset lower food and retail inflation. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, and Ministry of Trade and Industry, MTI, said in a press release.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Dayang Rabiah, and today I will be reviewing about the unemployment in Singapore. As you can see in the graph, it started in January 2016, where it is 1.8, and later it exceeded into 2.1 in July 2016. Much later, in January 2017, it goes 2.2 straight until July 2017, and then it dropped into 2.1. In 2008, In January 2008, it was 2.1, and it goes down into 2.0, and then July it goes 2.0, and then it goes up into 2.1. What has caused this? In 2016, after holding steady about 1.8 for 4 years, the annual average resident unemployment rate rose to 2.1% in 2016. This increase was broad-based across most age and education groups, with residents aged 30 to 39 and 50 and over registering larger increases. This is caused by more job seekers were taking a longer time to find the job. The annual average resident long-term unemployment rate, though still low, has rose up. The increase was broad-based across most age and education groups, especially those in their 50s and above. In addition, the long-term unemployment rate for degree holders rose to 0.1% in 2016, the highest since 2004. Next is 2017. The Singapore's Ministry of Manpower said that the country's annual average unemployment rate reached 2.2% last year, compared with 2.1% in 2016. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate for residents grew from 3% to 3.1%, and that for citizens grew from 3.1% to 3.3%. However, according to the advance release of the labor market report for 2017 from the ministry, however, as at the end of 2017, the unemployment rate last December was 2.1%, 0.1 percentage points lower than a year ago for overall. That for residents went down 0.3 percentage point to 2.9%, and that for citizens went down 0.5 percentage point to 3%. Last but not least, in 2018, Singapore's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate rose to 2.2% in the December quarter 2018 from 2.1% in the previous periods, and in line with the preliminary estimate final data showed. It was highest jobless rate since the second quarter of 2017 on the back of continued expansion in domestic economy. Considering full 2018, the unemployment rate inched lower to 2.1% from 2.2% in January. In the 3 months to December, the jobless rate inched higher for both residents, 3.0% from 2.9%, and citizens from 3.1% from 3.0%. Total employment, excluding foreign domestic workers, rose by 14,700, slightly lower than in the previous quarter, 16,700, but still higher than the same quarter a year ago, 10,700. Job losses were observed in manufacturing, 2,000 less, the bulk from petroleum, chemical and pharmaceutical products, minus 1,200, and construction amid weakness in public sector construction activities. Meantime, job gains were recorded in services, 17,000, excluding foreign domestic workers, supported by hiring for festive season, namely food and beverages services and retail trade. Some 2,510 workers were laid off, down from 2,860 from 3,680 a year earlier. This increase in services was more than offset by lower layoffs in manufacturing. Retrenchments in construction remains similar. For full 2018, the annual average unemployment rate edged down to 2.1% from 2.2% in 2017, which was the highest annual figure since 2010. Unemployment fell for both residents, 2.9% from 3.9% in 2017, and citizens, 3.0% from 3.3%. That is the review of unemployment from 2016, 2017, and 2018.